say we take off and nuke the entire site from orbit. It's the only way to be sure.
Fucking A.
Oh, hold on 1 second. This installation has a substantial dollar value attached to it.
They can bill me.
Hey, look. This is an emotional moment for all of us, okay? I know that. But let's not make snap judgments, please. This is clearly an important species we're dealing with, and I don't think that you or I or anybody has the right to arbitrarily exterminate them.
Hold on.
Yeah, watch us.
Hey, maybe you haven't been keeping up on current events, but we just got our asses kicked, pal.
Oh, man. Is it weird that a James Cameron movie, the guy who made the biggest films of all time, one of the richest, if not the richest filmmakers on earth, is, I think, who made me a communist as a young child?
He turned you into a socialist.
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, he's such a contradiction on so many different levels, especially the early part of the career, which we're talking about today. We're doing Terminator and Aliens 2 years apart. How did this get released 2 years? It's insane. What episode are you on, Chris? I don't even know. Do you know what we're on? We're in the 80s.
We're in the 80s. So let me do some quick math. That would make it episode number 5.
Episode number 5 of Film Trace, folks. The podcast where we trace the life of a film from conception to production, all the way to release and reception. We have a special guest. Another member of Spoilerpiece Theatre is here. Dave, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Dave Riedel. I'm from Spoilerpiece Theatre. I write for the Chicago Reader, and I yap about movies, and I'm generally pretty negative about them, so I apologize in advance.
That's good. Good disclaimer. So we're Future Wars, right?
Right. So what is the deal here with James Cameron doing 2 different films within 2 years of each other in the mid 80s, both extremely huge blockbusters? Either one started a franchise, another one made sure that it continued, and he's seemingly obsessed, as is like the general movie-going audience, about this concept of what happens when we inevitably have to go to war against some kind of futuristic enemy. What is your guys' history with, feel free to talk, in general about the Terminator movies, but to be specific, the first one, because I kind of have a weird backstory, but maybe we should let our guest go. Dave.
Yeah, Dave,
sure.
Tell us your history, your personal history with James Cameron's The Terminator.
Okay, so the first time I saw The Terminator, it was on TV, and I don't know if it was like cable, because I remember the scene where I entered was when Ginger gets shot in the back. And I was like, no. And so I must have been like 11 or something like that. I don't remember. It was really freaky to me. And then I saw it again. I saw Aliens a couple of years later, and then I was like, oh, I should watch The Terminator because I think that's the same guy. And so then I watched it. I was, 12 or 13 or something like that. But I think I've seen The Terminator probably a dozen times.
Nice.
So, I have an appreciation for it. Although watching it this time, it was is a little ragged. I felt like
jarring.
This time.
Yeah. It's
ragged. Totally good word. And for me anyways, that has always been part of the appeal. Mm-hmm. And yet I think you're right. As we get older and we rewatch it, and especially as, technology in the movie making business advances further and further, you go back and it's kind of quaint. Like like a little movie about a robot that'll kill everything in its path.
Yeah.
Small little film.
Right. Dan, what's your history?
I don't think I actually saw this all the way through until I was in college.
Really?
I definitely saw Terminator 2 when I was a kid, because that came out, 91?
91.
Yeah, 91.
Yeah.
So I would have been 9 years old, and somehow I saw it. My parents didn't care.
In the theater?
No, I saw it at like a friend's house, probably.
Blockbuster?
Yeah. And I was absolutely blown away. Like it was like seared in my mind for like all of my childhood and teenage. It was like one of my favorite movies. But for some reason, I never like checked out the early Terminator. I was like, I don't need to see it because I know 2's better. And then I saw it in college. Yeah, saw it in college, but then I don't think I actually like really saw it until I was doing a rhetoric paper on nuclear war language in the 1980s. And for some reason, I thought Terminator, I mean, it is associated with that concept. And so I like watched it really closely. And I was just like, oh, this is, yeah, it's absolutely one of my favorite movies. And even on rewatch, I don't know, I love it more and more. It's such a fascinating film to me on so many different levels. Yeah.
I think that your guys' backgrounds are very normal. I kind of fucked up as a child. And my brother, showed me way too much violent stuff, and especially violent movies featuring Arnold Schwarzenegger. And so for a very long time, like perhaps until I was like a teenager, like 13, I thought that the Terminator was Commando. And, awesome. And so I was, very fun movie. So I was very confused when I found out that like Terminator 2 was a sequel to the Terminator. Like I had thought, like when I saw Terminator 2, I was like, where's the, fun, actual war with terrorists in the jungle? Like, why are we in America right now? It was very jarring. And then of course, I got my shit straightened out and, rewatched the Terminator and then kept going through. And then of course I think were we in college, Dan, when Terminator 3 came out?
That sounds about right.
I know it sounds like, because it's so forgettable, and yet I was so hyped for that movie, and I continued to just like be the dummy that never learns, because I was so hyped for that, disappointed, so hyped for Salvation, disappointed, and then Genesis, I don't know. And there's probably another one in there that I'm forgetting.
Yeah,
Dark Fate.
Dark Fate. Thank you.
Yeah, the most recent one, Dark Fate.
Which one? Right?
Yeah,
or is
so.
Genesis? I don't know.
Dark Fate's the one that's the direct sequel to T2.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. So it's one of those things where it's like, how is it that these movies, these two films from the beginning of the franchise, when Cameron was still doing his thing, how did we lose the plot so much? I think we could probably say that something similar for the Alien franchise, but it does seem like, in particular, like nobody disagrees about specifically like the action and the kind of formative experiences that anyone had, especially us like elder millennials, with the first two Terminator movies. So I'm curious your guys' thoughts on that, but I also know that we need to do the thing where we're like, where the hell did this movie come from, and trace its origins. So I'll pass it off to whoever wants to pick up either of those threads, and we can circle back to the other.
Oh man. I just want to, the only thing I want to say, like the origin is, every time we do a show, I'm like blown away by how much Roger Corman has formed American cinema. Like it is mind blowing to me. Isn't he still alive? He's still, I think he's 100 years old or something. I like, there's Ron Howard and stories like that, but like, I feel like half the people that we cover, Corman gave them a break somehow.
It was Corman and Dino De Laurentiis is the nexus.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, I think the fact that, Cameron, his early life is really weird too, or fascinating, because it's like he's somebody who clearly was obsessed with filmmaking from a young age and did not really have a well-trodden path to follow in his life, it seems like, to get there. It's like there's all these stories about him being a truck driver, a janitor, going into like colleges to look up papers on technical or special effects and stuff. Like, he was somebody who was driven by a really, really deep passion. And, he got his breakthrough Corman, like a lot of people did. And then it's infamous. I don't know the huge background story in Piranhas 2, but I know that he was fired pretty much immediately after getting hired to direct it. But I find James Cameron, especially his path to Terminator, really interesting in Aliens. What blows my mind about that is, and kind of like makes me sad on some level, is looking at these early films. He's such a passion-based filmmaker, the type of guy who wants to know how all the technical effects work, obsessed with writing well. He's an English major, tried to study physics as well. Like, he's like one of those Renaissance dudes who's in everything for like the end goal of making a great film, which I'm always like, like, I think that's super admirable. And I look up to people like that. But then to see his later career and like the Avatar stuff, it's just like, so there's something in this earlier work, specifically Terminator, that is completely missing from his older work. And I don't know what it is exactly, but I don't know. I mean, that's kind of my like first take on it. There's something there that was going on when he was younger that led him to Terminator, that, there was a hunger and a rawness in what he was doing that's like totally gone. I don't know, Dave, what do you think? Does that ring true to you? Or
Oh, it rings totally true to me. I think that the greatest and worst thing that ever happened to him was Titanic being really, really successful, because even though that was $250 million budget and 6 months overdue in shooting, and then 6 months overdue in editing. And I remember the ads being pulled, that said July of whatever year it was, and then like Christmas. And it's like, what? And I was around the film biz enough to know, like, well, that's bad news. But then it was enormous, right? But when he made it, I feel like he had the passion of like a no budget filmmaker. Like, I gotta fucking make this thing, and I gotta do it the best that I can, and this is my only shot. And he had just come off True Lies? Was that what he made before Titanic?
I think that sounds about right.
I think that's right.
So he'd had just like a million hits in a row, but he kind of treated all of those as like, this is do or die for me. And I think after Titanic, it was so fucking huge. And, he lost his personal fortune when he was making it because he had to put his own money into it. But then he got it all back because, of all the kickbacks or whatever you call it, residuals. I don't know. The technical money shit. And I think after that, he just wanted to like explore the ocean. And I think that Avatar is almost like an afterthought. It's like, hey, these blue creatures that live on the water, I can, create a camera that like, we can have Zoe Saldana wear dots on her face, but she'll look real in the movie. And that's more of like, it's stuff in the ether that, like, who gives a shit? Like the whole thing with Avatar, it's like, I saw the first one and I remember thinking, wow, I actually feel like I'm on a different planet. Yeah. Because at one point I was swatting away the insects in front of me and I was like, oh no, this is 3D. And but the new one, I couldn't give a shit. Like, there's no if I ever see it, it'll be a mistake. And so
it's very long and very boring.
Yeah. And I had a good nap. Yeah.
And I feel like with like the Terminator, it's like it's an hour and 48 minutes. It's got some slower spots because he's like, he hasn't quite figured out pacing yet, but when it works, it really fucking works. And the thing that the Terminator does really well is it's eerie. It's an eerie fucking movie.
Yeah, it's got some vibe to it, and it's like I don't know. There's something. It's like it's the rawness and the punk attitude that just still there. When you watch, it's like it's so clear that this is kind of DIY in a lot of ways. And like, look, it was a $6 million film. So it wasn't like, super low budget and like that. But for $6 million, what they did back then was just outrageous. Yeah. I mean, I was looking at like budgets for other movies that came out in '84. Gremlins cost $11 million. Karate Kid cost $8 million. Amadeus cost $18 million. Wow. And so this is like below all the, like, this is below Karate Kid.
$11 million?
Yeah,
it looks like it costs $3. I've never understood the appeal of Gremlins. So I mean, maybe that's on me. I know a lot of people love it, but
I love Gremlins. Like,
I do like the Gremlin in the microwave. I'll give you that. But otherwise,
that's a great scene.
But yeah, I mean, the whole thing's just, oh man, it's so punk.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, to the point where one of the things that I don't think I had watched the Terminator, the first one, since like tech noir became its own term in the pop culture. Oh yeah, totally. Like
I had no idea it was its own.
yeah, we're going to cover it when we do Alphaville. Like that's often referred to as like a tech noir, like Johnny Mnemonic, that whole like string of 90s.
What's the difference between tech noir and cyberpunk?
Well, I think that like it's gradations. Yes, they're very much interlinked, but like this, it's amazing to me that like, you know, Cameron just does this like kind of throwaway, like, tech noir, like combining that for the name of this nightclub in his movie. And now it's like, it's part of a lexicon where you could easily like look at and trace back this vibe that you mentioned, where it's kind of like, punk. So there's the cyberpunk connection, but also like this, like, as Dave was saying, like that eeriness, like that kind of like quietly mysterious existential despair that feels very kind of like prevalent in a really like visceral way. And obviously then you use the term to even go back further to like not only Alphaville, but other movies like Blade Runner. And it's weird how like it seems like the Terminator doesn't, it often gets just like pigeonholed as like this action film, kind of like T2. And I think that's kind of why I come back and I still prefer the original Terminator. Even though as a kid, I was like you, Dan, I totally was all about T2. But T2 is like this very like brightly lit like movie, and it's like big, and there's something about like that granular quality of the first one where, like you were saying, Dave, it has this kind of do or die aesthetic to it. It doesn't feel like it's polished or carefully put together by, you know, a studio with millions of dollars that they can just throw around willy-nilly. And it also doesn't have like a semi-annoying teenage boy in their head either.
Edward Furlong.
I know.
Sad stories. Well, here's a question though. Like we were talking about, I think we all agree it has this vibe to it, or there's the eeriness, as you put it, Dave. Where does that come from? Is that
I can peg it?
What do you think?
It comes back now. It's kind of a cheat because I didn't necessarily think of it as eerie until when they get to the stop motion Terminator at the end. It becomes a horror movie to me, and it's just like, I'm on the edge of my seat, and I'm just like, I don't know what it is. The really cool titanium silver or whatever it is Terminator looks great, but when they cut to the stop motion stuff, it's just, stop motion is just so inherently weird that it just becomes scarier. And I think those scenes in particular, you can see the front projection, and you can see just kind of the seams in the movie, and it just feels like, there's something just like nasty about it that makes my skin crawl in a good way.
Well, that image is the origin that I came across when researching, right? It's James Cameron said in a BFI interview in 2021 that the first visual he had in his head was from a dream that he had while he was sick with a fever in a cheap hotel in Rome in 81. And that image was a chrome skeleton emerging from a fire. And as soon as he woke up, he began sketching it. And so it's kind of like, I mean, there's lots of, I feel, stories, like you can even connect that back to like the design of Alien and H.R. Geiger's design of this kind of iconic image. It comes from, somewhere between a dream and a nightmare. A dream because, like you said, Dave, it looks good, like it's aesthetically pleasing, but it's also incredibly horrific and strange and one of a kind. And so, like, by being able to thread that needle, that's, I think, where not just classic movies of this kind of genre emerge, but also in perhaps both of these cases, these kind of interminable franchises, pun intended.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting too that you look at the juxtaposition of Terminator versus T2, where Terminator, it does have that sort of horror vibe to it at certain parts, and it feels darker and more sort of murky than T2, and T2's clear action. Same thing with Aliens and Alien, right? Like
Yeah,
Alien
totally.
is a horror film. And it's unbelievable horror film, probably my top 5 films. And Aliens is an unbelievable action movie. It's weird how they both have that same sort of pattern to them. I think one thing in Terminator that stood out to me, and this is probably because I kind of came to it from like I had to write a paper on it, so it was like kind of different. But like the thing that blew me away about Terminator, like there's all the technical aspects that are cool. There's all like the pure 80s like LA vibes going on, which is so cool. To me, it's like kind of lame as the story is. The story just like blows me away every time I see it. And I'm just like, how do you come up with something like this? Like the way that it twists and turns, and like the thought process of him going back in time to be with a woman that he loves from the past, and then they end up, you know, having sex, and the whole thing, and like giving birth to the revolutionary that leads. The whole thing's nuts. Like it's totally nuts and crazy, and belongs in like a dime store sci-fi novel, but for some reason it feels so elevated in this movie. I don't know why. Did you guys have like the whole nuclear apocalypse and the rise of AI and all these themes that are going on? Do you guys get a lot out of that, or is that something that's kind of just on the side?
Oh, Chris, why don't you go first?
Okay, sure. You know, the thing that I actually sidebar, but I'll bring us back there. One of the aspects of the film that stood out to me this time rewatching was actually the comedic beats, and one of the comedic beats that felt particularly interesting, knowing how inflated James Cameron ego has become, and maybe has always been, is when the forensic psychologist is reviewing the tape of Michael Biehn recounting, like, you know, how he came from the future and blah blah blah. He tells that whole story, and the forensic psychologist is like, "This is brilliant." So it's like basically James Cameron inserting a character to say that he's brilliant, right? And,
I hadn't thought of that.
but it's you know, yeah, and it's like just subtle enough that it comes across as like genuinely, like there are those people that have like these huge egos that just are obnoxious, and you never want to deal with them, much less like, you know, hear them pontificate for hours on end. But because James Cameron knows how to do it with such entertainment value, and also like, I don't know, it was also almost like memified. I also do not care for the Avatar movies, but like when the whole Ocean Gate thing happened, and you know, James Cameron like was just like happy to go on the interview circuit and be like, yeah, here's what they did wrong, this like like that's obscenely narcissistic to just like go up there and do that. But for some reason he gets away with it, because I mean, the guy is, you know, as misguided perhaps as the latter half of his career has been, he is smart as hell, and he is just like kind of a soothsayer when it comes to this stuff. And yeah, maybe he's too obsessed with like making things wet all the time, but it doesn't mean that like it doesn't detract from the fact that like he's responsible for so much of what makes action movies amazing. And I will just add in a quick kind of qualifier to that like obviously this isn't just Cameron. Like Stan Winston, going back to the Chrome Terminator and the Harryhausen style stop motion, that's, I think, a huge piece, is that he's able to like collaborate with these kinds of geniuses. And I do think Linda Hamilton's phenomenal in the role and sells that kind of emotional story, and so does Michael Biehn. Like, I don't know what happened to that guy, but he's great in both of these movies. And it's unfortunate that you know, he gets killed off in the prologue of Alien 3, and then also, you know, it has to do the hero's demise in this movie, which precludes him from coming back in the sequels.
Yeah. What do we think there's any deep message in here that Cameron's saying that he's right about? I mean, we have ChatGPT. I was just on ChatGPT taking notes on this, so it's so weird.
You don't have to admit that, Dan.
Does he have any messages? I mean, basically that human beings are like bad. I think that's his message. You know, I don't really think it's much. I don't know that James Cameron is the deepest guy, but he does. You know, it is funny that you said that he's a soothsayer, because he did get a lot of stuff right about filmmaking technology anyway. Sure. And of course he did invent, you know, I mean, didn't he kind of design that submarine that he went down and explored the Titanic with? Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, and Kyle Reese is very wet a lot with sweat in the Terminator. So there's that too. Yeah, I don't know if I really care so much about the, you know, I'm coming from the future to, you know, save Sarah Connor so that I can implant a baby in her who will then save humanity in my time. Like, when I say it out loud and hearing you guys chuckle, it is just like, that is cockamamie. But, you know, it serves as the basis for like a lean, nasty, you know, horror / action movie. I was watching it. Was it today or yesterday? I watched it in the last 24 hours. And I was just kind of amazed at the police station scene when Arnold drives through the, you know, the iconic line, then he drives through the thing and he just starts blowing everybody away. I was like, I couldn't believe how tense that was. Right. And it should be just corny as shit, but because it's just this thing that can't be stopped shooting people. But for some reason, I think it's you know, Winfield and Lance Henriksen, and then, you know, you've just had Reese being all like, I gotta find Sarah, and screaming at the psychologist. You know, I've always thought that Michael Biehn's performance is really overwrought in this, but then I was reconsidering, thinking, well, if he came from a future where, you know, you breathe the wrong way, you could get like sniped by a machine. I guess it kind of makes sense that you would be on edge all the time.
And it's interesting watching him in this film, right next to Aliens, because while he plays a similar kind of, you know, protective army guy, he, in that film, in Aliens, it has to be the like more restrained half to Ripley's like overwroughtness. And I think, I mean, maybe to kind of throw a bomb into it all, I wonder if whether it's the performances or the effects or I don't know, Cameron's kind of sensibilities aesthetically, do you guys feel like this is a movie that could have easily just been a one and done and been like a lost gem of the 80s? Like, I'm very curious, why did this movie not necessarily like become like a massive monster hit, but enough to like kind of stagger out these sequels so for so long? Like, what keeps it? It's because it can't just be Arnold. It can't just be you know, the kernel of the story, because you're right. Like, both of them are ridiculous. I don't know. It seems like there's so many things playing against this movie. Not to even like bring up the fact that I still want to know what happened to Pugsley the iguana. But
right. Yeah, he jumps off the end. Yeah, he jumps off the refrigerator while she's making that, you know, post-sex sandwich, and then that's right.
I think that, like, I mean, there's a lot in this movie about how it was marketed, how it was released. They did not believe in this movie, right? Like, they just, you know, I think there's some quote. One of the executives is like, you made exactly what I was afraid you'd make, an exploitation picture in the Corman style. And the thing is, I never picked up on that until very recently. That when you watch this movie, has a style of the exploitation. Like, it's the ultra violence, all the dark, sort of shadowy shots constantly. The whole thing is shot at night, essentially. But yeah, it just was not, they didn't market it a lot. I don't think the test screenings were going very well. You know, Cameron even says, you know, the executive in charge was not a friend, and he didn't like the movie. He didn't understand the movie. And, you know, it did well, but it didn't have a huge splashy launch. It kind of did well in spite of a lack of marketing and support from the studio, which is credit to the film and what the message it had, or the style that it had. It just sort of popped off with people when they actually saw it.
Yeah, I mean, this is back in a time when, you know, I mean, think about 1984 and what you had and what you didn't have. I mean, I remember being a kid, not in 1984, a little bit later, but like not like looking at the paper and, you know, seeing what movies were playing on a rainy Saturday afternoon. And you would go to the one that my friends and I would go to the ones we hadn't heard of because you're like, maybe there'll be naked chicks in it, you know? So, so maybe, I mean, if it had been, I was too young to see the Terminator in theaters. But had it been out when I was, you know, 13 or 14 or whatever, I might have been like, there's a movie called The Terminator. That sounds crazy. And I bet the combination of Schwarzenegger was just getting big because of Conan the Barbarian and, you know, Pumping Iron had been like the late 70s. And so he was kind of a known quantity. Right. His stature is rising. James Cameron at least had some heat in the film world, not necessarily as a filmmaker per se, but you know, he'd gotten the job for writing Rambo. He'd kind of come through miraculously unscathed from Piranha. And so he wrote this like nasty little script. And because he had Schwarzenegger and because he had, I think that drive, and because it only cost $6 million, that combined with Arnold, I think is what pushed it forward. I think there were probably enough people who like, there's this weird Austrian guy who I saw in Conan the Barbarian, and he's like playing some weird killer. Let's just go see it. Who gives a shit? I guarantee half of the conversations were that conversation. So I'm going back and using my magic 8-ball, of course, but
the one thing that struck me too when watching it, I just watched it yesterday again, is how well this kicks off a franchise, this movie. It is just like the perfect start origin story because it's not that long. Like we said, it's pretty tight at like under 150 or an hour and 50 minutes. And it just, and the ending's perfect for a sequel. I mean, absolutely perfect. And I just like, that is, when you look back at it, like that is a lot of seeing into the future for James Cameron. Like the ability to take a $6 million budget, only really knowing filmmaking from like doing it with like Roger Corman, which is like total guerrilla filmmaking through and through, but having a good enough script and like concept of like do you think he made this thinking there's going to be a sequel? He must have, right? Because it's just like, I don't know. It's so perfect.
There's this like on Reddit of Starlog interview, old mid 80s like sci-fi magazine feature on Cameron, and you know he does a lot of the talk about, you know, the importance of entertainment. He I mean, I don't know what Scorsese would think, but he likens what he was trying to do with the Terminator as like what a team of engineers do when they get together and design a ride at Disney World. And I think like that part he's kind of unabashedly about. I don't know how franchise oriented Hollywood in general was during this time. Obviously, a lot of franchises began in the early to mid 80s, like Indiana Jones and what have you. But like, it does seem like there was more of a attention to detail when it came to like, I want, like you were kind of saying at the top of the show, Dave, like he wanted this to be his legacy. He's always in those early films trying to one up himself and trying to make it like this is going to be something huge, but not necessarily. I don't know and maybe that's part of the deal with like, especially the post T2 sequels. I mean, why didn't Cameron come back to them? What made him like want to hop over to True Lies and then Titanic, other than like he's just thinking about spectacle at different levels in different genres?
Well, I heard a story recently, and I don't know whether it's apocryphal or not, but that after T2, when Carolco, is that what it was called? I know that's how it's spelled. I don't know how to pronounce it. So after it went belly up, Schwarzenegger came to James Cameron and said, you know what? They're going to lose all the rights to their movies because they're going to have to sell them off to pay all of their creditors. We should buy the rights to the Terminator, and then you and I can own it, and we can do whatever we want with it. and James Cameron was like relaying that story to some producers who he was showing Titanic to, and they went out and bought it from underneath him. So that is how we got all of the sequels that don't involve him, because he was kind of irritated about it, I guess, but not at the same time, not, heartbroken, because I've heard him say things like, well, I'm not really, I'm not a studio guy. I make movies. I don't, He
knows it's a game, and
and so I'm sure he regrets it now because of all the money they did generate. But I kind of feel like once that was out of his hands and once other people owned it who had, if it's true, kind of stolen it out from underneath him, like they probably didn't even want to involve him, because, why would you, if that's true, it's like, hey, come make a movie for us that we totally bought the rights to. It's kind of like a Michael Jackson, Paul McCartney thing, right? It's like their friendship ended when Michael Jackson bought the Beatles catalog, or at least Paul McCartney's half. So, I think of it that way.
I think there's just a part of where he's just a guy that gets bored really easily, and he climbed this mountain, and like T2 is another mountain to climb, and Aliens was its own thing, and then he's just like, I'm done with this. I got to do something different. He just seems like one of those guys who's never satisfied. Until he came across, Smurfs in the Rainforest, and I'm sorry,
Smurfs in the Rain. That was actually the working title. So.
And now he was satisfied for life. Like this fills him up more than anything, the Avatar world, or something. I don't know. He was obviously way more hungry when he was younger, but to me, it's just something he gets bored. How about this leap though, from Terminator in 1984 to Aliens in 1986? Can we think of a better 1-2 combo from any filmmaker? Like maybe just in the action sci-fi, like there's nothing. Like it's just
an action director. I can't, not off the top of my head.
Yeah, I mean, two of, I think, the most iconic, not just action movies in the just 80s movies. Like they're just giants. Mm-hmm. And the fact that he was able to do both back to back is just mind blowing. I mean, what's everybody's relationship with Aliens? I think I saw Aliens before I saw Alien. And
really? Me too.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Alien was wasn't Alien late 70s? Like I want to say like
79. Yeah.
And so, I just kind of missed it, I think. And, I was a kid in the 80s, so I saw Aliens. Going back, I have the same relationship. Like I came to the franchise through the sequel, which I absolutely loved as a kid, but I like the originals more. I like Alien more than I like Aliens, but I love Aliens. So it's like, I don't know. What about you guys?
Sorry, you go ahead.
Okay. It's real quick. It's just that like, I totally, it's weird because like I was totally the kid that was just absolutely trying to find like the action film to end all action films. And this was definitely up there, if not near or at the top. And then, my, like you said, Dan, my interest kind of went back to the original Alien, and I was obsessed with, all the symbology and subtext of that film and its status and kind of template as a horror slasher film in that genre. But so there was a part of me that was like a little bit reticent because it had been a while since I'd seen Aliens, because I'm like, I don't know, I'm just like not a huge action guy. But then like as soon as the first set piece starts up with everybody waking up from the cryogenic sleep and starting to put their battle gear on, it's just like, unlike, we talked about this briefly when we mentioned Starship Troopers, where it's just like, I don't know, that movie played a lot better for me when I was a teen, but like Aliens, just like there's something about the energy, and I think a lot of it once again has to do with the cast. This is an incredible ensemble for not just an action movie but a war movie, like this platoon that has this very kind of entertaining dynamic. Like the way they bounce off each other is just as kind of action packed metaphorically as the actual set pieces are. And so like there's something that just like brings it all back very easily. Like it feels very comfortable, but not in a way where it's like I'm bored of it. I still get thrilled and excited, even though I know every single beat from watching it so much when I was younger.
Yeah,
Dave, what about you? What's your relationship with it?
With Aliens? Aliens is one of my favorite movies, and I think of pretty much every movie in the Aliens, let's just call it a franchise, Aliens franchise, as a different, like they're not even related really, except they feature the Xenomorph and sometimes Ripley.
Yeah.
You know,
that's
like,
a good stance to have, I think.
Yeah, because it's like Alien is, a horror movie set on a ship, and then Aliens is an action movie set on a weird planet, and then the rest of them are what they are. And they're all so different from one another, I think partially because they had different filmmakers for most of them, but also because it's so much time between all of them. It's from release to release, it's 7 years between Alien and Aliens, which is at the time interminable as far as sequels go. But I think what works so well for Aliens is just I rewatched that this morning, and man, that movie holds up. It is truly a kind of a miracle. Even the humor, which is like, I think James Cameron's like weakest. I mean, if you watch The Abyss, the humor in The Abyss is just so cringe. But the humor, for some reason, I think it's because Michael Biehn is so good as Hicks, and then you've got Bill Paxton post teeth work as Hudson, who's so great, and Drake and Apone. I don't know the actors' names, but anyway,
Vasquez.
Vasquez, right?
Vasquez.
And then the secret ingredient to Aliens, which of course is Paul Reiser.
God, yeah, it's. So
every time I watch that, I'm blown away by how good he is and what a great character that is. And how he's, even when he's being a slime, you're like, I kind of like this guy though. I don't know why. Yeah. But I first saw Aliens. I didn't see it in the theater because there was no way that my parents would let me go see it. But when my older brother's a huge sci-fi guy. So he had seen it and he was like, you got to see this, kid. And so when it came out on video, we rented it and I was like, this is great. And every time I watch it, I think, you watch this movie once a year. It's going to be bad or boring, or you're going to see the same show this year. Nope. Works every time. And I always notice something new every time. I never noticed until this time when I watched it. I've heard people talk about how Ripley and the Queen, the alien Queen, have like an unspoken agreement that that Ripley will leave with Newt and the Queen will let them go. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I see that, because I see the Queen hiss at the two, drones, and they back off. I'm like, but what are they talking about with the whole breaks the deal? And I'm like, oh, it's the egg opening up. Duh. I just realized that today. So if I've like I said, I've seen that once a year since 1987 or whatever. And I just noticed that now. I mean, talk about a movie holding up. I don't really know if I have another point.
Hold up? Why does it hold up so well? Like, why does it still click?
Well,
even Michael Biehn said that in the interview. He's like, this is like a perfect film.
Well, it's so lean. I mean, it looks like it's huge and it's got a long run time, but there is not a moment of wasted time in this movie. No. Every scene, it's kind of like the classic thing that you hear about in screenwriting class. It's like, get into the scene as late as you can, get out as early as you can. And this movie, it does that. It never gives you more information than you need at that moment. And even if you watch the theatrical version as opposed to the special edition with, you learn more about Ripley's daughter, et cetera, et cetera. It's great to have all that stuff, but you don't even really need it because you don't miss it not knowing it, because you still know that something's going on with Ripley's personal life that we're not seeing spelled out for us. But otherwise, why is her connection to Newt so strong from the beginning? And the other thing that's great about it is you believe Sigourney Weaver because she's Sigourney Weaver. So you don't even question, if you're not watching the special edition, why does she care about Newt so much? So, it's just all those things, all these things that you maybe in a lesser movie you would think, wait, that doesn't quite make sense that they would, why are Hicks and Ripley kind of being cute with the whole this is a tracker and I can find you wherever you are thing when they've just seen like 17 people eaten alive by aliens. Like who get, whatever, it's aliens, it's great, it all works. Okay,
I'm gonna push back a little because I'm curious. What I can't help but, and this is, you could very much argue this with the first film too, which makes it interesting and just makes the conversations better, I think. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but like one thing that stood out to me very much so with this rewatch is that maternal relationship. And the one thing about the first film that made kind of Ripley's role as a final girl so much more more interesting than a lot of those kind of early final girls in horror movies is kind of her lack of prescription to gender. And then here, like, yes, it makes it for a really emotional story of her constantly being the protector, the maternal figure to Newt. And yet I keep coming back to, like, as I was watching, like, but why? Like, she has to ascribe her like kind of fierce passion onto something, and it for so long has been self-preservation. What's making her finally care about the other person? Is that like, you could easily like, and obviously I feel like if it was made today, we would have this horrible like backstory about the trauma of loss from the first film and all that, and that would be bad. But it just feels like, is that piece missing? Is it unfair for kind of Cameron to come in? Because it does seem like, I mean, Cameron's got some weird like gender things. On the one hand, he makes very strong female characters often at the center of his movies, and yet at the same time, like, whether it's his personal life or the way in which he kinds of controls and magnanimously is, the end-all be-all director, and his even professional relationships going back with Gale Ann Hurd, who was very much an active producer in this. It does feel like it feels a little bit like, oh, she's a woman, so she's got to be the mom. Yeah,
like even when they first see the kid, they're like, Ripley, get up here. It's a kid. Yeah, you're the one supposed to take care of her. Yeah. It's also, it's the Reagan years.
Yeah, blame it on Reagan. Okay.
I mean, seriously though, like,
I'm happy to blame a lot of things on Reagan.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure, let's pile
that
it
makes
on.
it easy. Yeah.
But no, it's a good point that like there's look at like Terminator. And look at Terminator and Alien, and like the rawness, the sort of, there was something that was transgressive almost about both of those films. There's nothing transgressive about Aliens, right? Like, it's heroes and traditional gender roles for the most part. And yeah, I mean, that's definitely a clear criticism of it. Does it take away? Yeah, it does. There's a little bit of that's probably like why I personally like Alien more than I like Aliens, is that while Aliens is like basically a perfect action film, I mean, maybe like Die Hard's in competition with it, but that's about it. There is a little bit of that rawness that has been polished off or buffered off by Cameron that leaves a little bit, it's not, I wouldn't put Aliens in my top 50 films, maybe top 100, but there's just something, maybe a little bit element that's kind of missing for me personally. And I think it is that sort of more traditional story, narrative arc, and all that kind of stuff. It is, but that also makes it tight, it makes it like really potent. So yeah, it's kind of like a trade-off, I think, on some level. I don't know. It's too bad about both these series, because the Terminator series, one of my favorite story arcs, in the beginning of a story, origin story, whatever, just been decimated by the sequels. I mean, the only thing that I'll watch is Sarah Connor Chronicles, which was what canceled after a single season. And then what about Alien? What happened there? I mean, when's the last time you guys saw Alien 3?
Oh man, I saw it not so long ago because I was like, "Is it as bad as I remember?" Yes,
is it as bad? It is.
Oh, it's absolutely. It might be worse than you remember.
It was really bad when I saw it, and I love Fincher though. I mean,
I also have not seen it in a while, but I was a defender of it for a hot minute.
I remember you were, you were a defender of it.
I was, and it's funny because like Fincher makes so many questionable choices, and yet you can't deny like there's a lot of those makings of this really precise eye for camera work, and the fact that he's able to make like this really like gross, dingy prison planet a setting that looks as good as it does, that it feels as like real as it does, is I think worth something. But the way that it starts and the way that it ends and the way that the whole middle goes, it's like
you're saying there's
the whole
no good
thing.
part
Then
it's the story that's the problem, and that's a pretty big problem, unfortunately.
Has there been a good Aliens movie since this one?
Are we gonna?
You want to touch Prometheus and Covenant? I've seen Covenant a lot, and wow, is it bad?
Prometheus is just like a. Oh, you do?
For Covenant.
Okay.
For myself, for Fassbender playing whatever he's playing, the recorder.
The skin flute.
Oh, God, that movie's so... But here's the thing. The opening of that movie, of Alien Covenant, I thought it was interesting and good up until Michael Fassbender's doppelganger shows up.
See, I feel the opposite.
Of course you do.
Wow.
Is there any hope for any of these series? Any hope?
No, I don't know. I mean, I've seen Prometheus once, and I thought it was like, it's not great. It's an interesting misfire. Yes. But Alien Covenant is god awful. I mean, it is. I didn't like it from the moment it began, but by the time they get to the scene where you see the same severed head floating in the water 3 times because 3 different characters have to discover it to be freaked out and be like, something weird's going on. It's just like, what are we doing here? Like we've. I mean, I know that the Alien you can lean into the boogeyman territory because why not? But at the same time, don't do that. Like Ridley Scott's too smart to be like severed head equals bad. Well, no shit. I mean, let's find a different angle to convey this message.
I think there's an argument to be made that it's camp and that Ridley knew what he was doing, making it a camp film, but it's a difficult argument to make. Also,
yeah, it's a very difficult argument to make, and an unsuccessful one. No, all right. Any closing thoughts on these films before we kick over to trivia?
The last thing that I wanted to kind of ask you guys your thoughts, maybe this can serve as final thoughts, is the war aspect is. Kind of interesting because the distinction that I found between the 2 films, coming both from Cameron, is that he seems to have a very different view of warfare in both films. In the first one, he's like very much on the side of this like guerrilla revolutionary kind of like anti-establishment track. And in some ways he's that here, at least like thinking in the larger sense of the Alien franchise. I think another thing besides the xenomorph and sometimes Sigourney Weaver that it has in common is this anti-corporate sentiment, and the company, Wayland being this faceless evil entity that only cares about warfare and bioweapons and that kind of thing. So what is it about? And then you got the whole Bishop thing with Aliens where it's like, okay, now Cameron is pro AI instead of anti, and that continues with Terminator 2 and how they do the swappy swap with Schwarzenegger. is there a clear political angle in terms of like what side of a war, if any, is noble, is righteous in Cameron's eyes, or is it just big bang, go boom, aliens?
I don't want to reduce him to nothing, but I think he's a big bam, go aliens kind of guy. I think part of the reason that Aliens is the way it is because he didn't want to remake Alien, you know? So that's why it's an action movie instead of a horror movie. And that's why T2 is an action movie instead of a weird sci-fi horror movie. And that's why he pivoted to comedy with what's the Schwarzenegger one we already mentioned, True Lies.
Lies, yeah.
So I think that he's just got to do something different, and I don't know what his political leanings are. I mean, he's Canadian, so who can tell? But I think that he's more interested in telling what he thinks is the best story, and if that means you're a gorilla in the Terminator, great, and if that means you got to think about the war, though. I mean, the company is still the evil. The in a way, the Marines in Aliens are kind of the outsider faction because they're up against Burke, who is the corporation. So
that's true.
There's a little bit of similarity between those two things. And real quick, I don't mean to steal things, but somebody had said, "What's the 1-2 punch?" Like Terminator and Aliens. I thought of two other directors.
Yeah.
By the way, McTiernan.
Yes.
Predator, Die Hard, Hunt for Red October.
Boom.
And this one's a little bit, you can question me on this one, but Andrew Davis, Under Siege, The Fugitive.
All right. Under Siege, I think, is a little light, but
it's a little light.
The Fugitive is such
The Fugitive's
a tight
like
movie.
perfect.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. So good.
Maybe
good
Under
pulls,
Siege deserves a rewatch.
The only reason I really mentioned
Territory deserves a rewatch.
Eric Bogosian. Now you're talking.
Yeah. No, the reason I mentioned Under Siege is just because of the Tommy Lee Jones angle. So,
yes, that's true. That's true.
And the
That's
bridge
true.
to The Fugitive that way.
Yeah. Let's do some trivia.
Fair. Okay, trivia time. Here's the rules, Dave. Essentially, we're looking at other films from the same decade, so the 1980s, that fall into this thematic descriptor we've come up with of future wars. So movies where either warfare or, a small group going up against a large group, some kind of revolution angle in the sci-fi genre. And I have 5 keywords. I have 5 films, and I will list the keywords or phrases and see which of you can name the film first. And the best out of 5 wins. Got it?
So this is all future war films in the 80s, right?
Yep.
Cool.
Let's start with a pretty, let's start with a easy lob to warm up. The Wolverines. Radio Tri. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that was fast. Good job. Good job, Dave. All right.
Sorry. I feel like I'm gonna get blown out.
You're gonna get pummeled.
Dave's got too much film knowledge.
Okay, but Dave, what was your major in college?
What was that?
What was it? What did you study
in college? Oh, I have a film degree.
Okay. So, but Dan, fellow English major, maybe this one will be. We'll see. Room 101, Ministry of Truth.
1984.
There we go. Nice work.
Room 101. Oh, that's the final torture room. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. The John Hurt adaptation. Which
I don't think I've ever seen.
It's not very good, but it's somehow gotten reappraised recently. They put it on a Criterion channel. I don't know. Yeah. Whatever.
I saw it a couple 3 years ago and was not moved. So
right. I don't know. Anyways, next, here's one that should. No, it should not be reappraised. Okay, let's see if you get it. Reprogramming. Helicopter missiles. Operation Gotcha Last. SAINT.
Wow.
Nova Robotics.
Tough.
Helicopter missiles. Well, it's not Real Genius.
I almost used that one.
I love that movie.
It's so good.
So good.
Helicopter. I don't know.
Yeah, give us another clue.
Additional clue is that this is a comedy, like Real Genius, but this movie about robots is arguably even more jingoistic than Aliens.
War Games?
Oh, very close. You're getting closer.
I didn't hear what you said.
What Dan said?
Yeah.
He said he guessed War Games.
War Games. Okay.
That's not Future War, so.
I mean, you could argue from that time period they would.
Yeah.
But it's so okay.
What else you got?
We're gonna just blow the lid off. Fisher Stevens and Brownface.
Oh, the robot movie. Number 5. What's it called?
Oh, Short Circuit.
There we go. Yeah.
Short Circuit.
No, it does not deserve a reappraisal. And actually, I tried to watch it with my kid recently, and it's offensive in many more ways than just the brown face.
I'm sure.
Oh my god, horrible film.
I don't know if I've ever actually seen that.
Oh yeah, no, you're not missing much.
Yeah, okay. But I liked it growing up.
Gutenberg has a good smile.
Yeah.
This is, I think, back to good movie territory. Bosozoku, cryogenic storage, orbital weapon.
Buckaroo Banzai?
Oh, very good guess. No. Singularity. And the cat's out of bag with this one, Neo Tokyo.
Oh, Blade Runner?
Nope.
No.
Neo Tokyo. I should know that, but
Neo Tokyo.
Probably the best anime film of all time.
Ghost in the Machine?
Oh. No. Oh, yeah. I did.
Let me define Bosozoku for you. That is youth motorcycle culture in Japan, especially in the 1980s. Jordan Peele stole the motorcycle shot from this film and recreated it in live action for the ending of Nope with Keke Palmer.
Oh, I mean, there is an anime film called Neo Tokyo.
Yes,
but
it's not that. It's the film that I believe kind of started that trend of Neo Tokyo, post-apocalyptic. Here's what's going to happen. Starts with an A.
Akira?
Yeah, there we go. Akira.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
I should have known that. Sorry.
That's okay. No worries.
I've never seen it. I've only heard of it.
Oh my gosh. I'm not an anime guy, but it's
pretty good.
It really is an incredible film. Okay. We're going to end it right. Just to recap, I think we've got who got Short Circuit?
I think we're 2-2. Let's go 2-2.
2-2. Okay. Escape Pod.
Escape from New York.
Oh, I should have ended with Escape Pod. Nope, you're good. Nice work, Dan. Oh my gosh, I'm proud of you. You beat the guest.
Yeah, I know.
I'm sorry, Dave.
That's okay. I mean,
he's a zealous mensch.
I'm not. I hesitate to admit this now, but I think that Escape from New York's kind of a shitty movie.
Whoa. Okay. Well, it's nice having you because you won't be back.
No, I love John Carpenter, but I've never gotten on board with Snake Plissken, man. I don't know what it is.
I also like Escape from LA. I'm going to say it.
That's a bridge too far.
Safe place.
Yeah.
What do you got coming up on the podcast, Dave?
Oh wow, good question. Yeah, so we just the episode that we just saw the Marvels, so we'll be talking about that. And
nice.
It's
are superhero movies over, or
well, I mean, they probably should be. Because the Marvels, I don't know if either of you has seen it yet. It has problems.
Sunday. Yeah.
And it's just, I wouldn't say that it's bad, but it's not what you want it to be. We're also going to be talking. We're also going to be talking about Poor Things and Maestro, and on our Patreon, we're going to be discussing Scott Pilgrim versus the World, which I have never seen. So, yeah. Well, I have seen, much like I'm very hit or miss on Carpenter. I love the Carpenter films I love, and I don't like the ones I don't like. I feel the same way about Edgar Wright, except I hate all of his
100%.
movies.
Oh, hate all of them.
Well, except for the zombie movie. That one's all right.
Oh yeah, Shaun of the Dead.
What's that one called? Shaun of the Dead.
Shaun of the Dead. Yeah. Last Night in Soho is so bad.
I lost the thread with him. I'm no longer willing to give him a chance after Baby Driver. So
yeah.
That's fair. That's totally fair. Not a good movie.
Indulge your teenage ed.
What do we got coming up on Film Trace? We got Omega Man coming up. 70s.
Yeah.
Doctor Strangelove.
Eventually, yes.
60s. And then Day There Stood Still, and Invasion of Body Snatchers to close it out for the 50s. So we got a few more episodes to go. Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't seen.
We just did The Day There Stood Still, the 50s original. So that's that I'll be looking forward to listening.
Yeah,
it'd be
good
Dave.
stuff. Dave, thanks for being on the show with us, man.
Thank you for having me. And I'm sorry about Escape from New York. I feel like I kind of blew it at the end there.
We love that.
It definitely drags in the middle.
Thanks for listening, folks. This has been Film Trace.